So, you want to own a nuclear submarine? A real one, not some, replica sitting in a museum. We're talking a full-size steel hull, rated to dive past 300 meters, a reactor that runs for decades without refueling, and, yeah, capable of staying underwater for months at a time. Okay, here is the first fact you need to sit with. You cannot buy one, not at any price. The fuel inside a naval reactor is controlled fissile material in every single country on Earth that builds these things, and no government has ever sold a working reactor core to a private citizen, ever. So, for the rest of this, imagine you stop being a person. You are now a nation, you have a treasury, a shipyard, and a navy that wants one of these. Your first decision, and this matters, is what you're actually buying. Because, well, a nuclear submarine comes in 3 different products with 3 very different price tags. The attack submarine hunts other submarines and ships, gathers intelligence, fires cruise missiles. The ballistic missile submarine, this one carries nuclear weapons, and disappears into the ocean for months as your second strike deterrent. And then there's the guided missile submarine, a rarer type built to carry a huge number of cruise missiles and special forces. Each one gets justified, funded, and priced on its own line in your budget. And mixing them up? That's the fastest way to get this business wrong. Before you spend a single dollar, though, you need a reason that survives 30 years of budget cycles, because, that's how long you'll be paying for this decision. A conventional diesel-electric submarine is far cheaper to build and run, but it has to surface, or snorkel, every few days to recharge its batteries, which means it can be found. A nuclear reactor never needs air, so your submarine can stay submerged for as long as your food supply lasts, cross an ocean without surfacing once, and just disappear from every sensor searching for it. For a ballistic missile boat, that invisibility is the entire point. As long as one submarine is hiding somewhere in that ocean with nuclear weapons aboard, no enemy can eliminate your ability to strike back in a first attack. That single guarantee is what every number in this business is ultimately paying for. Start with the attack submarine, because the United States has built more of them than anyone, and the paperwork is public. The current design is the Virginia class. Early boats, back in the 2000s, ran around $2.8 billion each. The current version, Block 5, carries a longer hull with extra missile tubes and costs around $4.3 billion per boat, under the contract signed in 2019. The Navy's own budget request for 2026 prices the next boats at close to $5 billion each, if bought at the planned rate of 2 a year. Hold on to that word, planned. We'll come back to it. Before Virginia, there was Seawolf. And Seawolf is the cautionary tale you need to hear before you sign anything. The United States planned 29 of these attack submarines during the last years of the Cold War at a price of around $3 billion each, roughly $6 billion in today's money. Then, the Soviet Union collapsed. The threat the submarine was built to fight simply disappeared, and the program stopped at 3 boats. 26 planned submarines, erased from the budget, just like that. You can spend a decade designing the perfect weapon for a world that quietly stops existing halfway through construction. The submarine business runs on threat assessments made 10 to 15 years before delivery, and every single one of those assessments can be wrong. There's a second lesson too, buried inside the older submarines, and it changes your operating math over time. Older American attack submarines, the Los Angeles class, from the 1970s and 80s, needed a midlife refueling overhaul, roughly 30 years into service. A shipyard period that could run well over a year and cost hundreds of millions of dollars, on top of everything already spent. Modern reactors on the Virginia and Columbia classes are built with a core designed to last the entire service life of the boat, 33 years or more, with no refueling at all. That single engineering decision removed one of the largest recurring costs a submarine used to carry. It also means the reactor core is welded shut for the life of the boat, so any future redesign has to wait for an entirely new class of submarine rather than a midlife upgrade. Now, go one size up. The Columbia class is your ballistic missile boat, the one that will carry America's nuclear deterrent under the ocean, starting in the early 2030s. The Navy prices the first boat at around $16 billion. An independent congressional estimate puts it closer to $18 billion. The 11 boats that follow are projected to average around $9.4 billion each. The full 12-boat program comes to roughly $126 billion. That's more money than the entire yearly economic output of many countries. Spent on 12 submarines, other nations play the same game, just at smaller scale, and their numbers tell you just as much. Britain's Astute class, An attack submarine close to the size of a Virginia started at around £1,200,000,000 per boat for the first 3 hulls. By the later boats, the price had climbed past £1,500,000,000 each, and the whole 7-boat program is now valued above £12 billion, a full £1 billion more than it was quoted just a year earlier. France built 6 Barracuda-class attack submarines for a combined €9 billion, close to €1,500,000,000 per boat, and the lead boat ran years behind schedule before it ever touched water. And here's the interesting part. When France sold the Netherlands a version of the same design, with the reactor stripped out, replaced with conventional diesel-electric power, the price for 4 boats still came to €5,600,000,000. Pull the reactor out, and the price barely moves. That tells you the reactor is one cost driver among several: the sonar, the quieting technology, the combat systems, and a supply chain that runs through maybe 6 shipyards on the entire planet. Russia and China play the same game too, but with numbers nobody can fully verify. A Russian Yasin-class attack submarine has been priced around $1,500,000,000. A Chinese ballistic missile submarine has been estimated as low as $750 million. Treat both of those with real caution. Neither government publishes the kind of line-by-line budget that the American Congress, the British Parliament, and the French National Assembly require by law, so what you're seeing there is an outside estimate, not an audited number. Think for a second about how strange this market actually is. In most industries, thousands of sellers compete for millions of buyers. Here, only 6 countries on the planet operate a nuclear-powered submarine as of today: the United States, Russia, China, the United Kingdom, France, and India. Australia is set to become the 7th once its AUKUS boats arrive. The United States alone runs close to 70 of them. China has passed Russia to take 2nd place, with more than 30. Britain and France hold around 10 each. India has 2, with 2 more expected by the end of the decade. That's the entire customer list for this product, worldwide. Every single deal on it is negotiated government to government, in secret over years, because there is no open market to price it against. Buying the submarine, by the way, is only your entry fee. Owning it costs almost as much again. The Congressional Budget Office estimated that a single American attack submarine costs around $70 million a year in direct operating expenses, plus another $40 million in indirect support and $30 million in overhead. That adds up to roughly $140 million a year in older dollars, and after a decade of inflation, the real number today comfortably passes $150 million annually. Multiply that across a 33-year service life, and you are spending close to $5 billion just keeping one boat running, crewed and maintained, on top of the $4 billion or so it cost to build. Your purchase price is roughly half of what you actually end up paying. A large share of that yearly bill, by the way, is people, not parts. Crew costs alone make up about 1/3 of a typical attack submarine's annual operating budget. A Virginia-class boat carries around 132 crew, a Columbia-class missile boat carries around 155, and none of them walk straight from boot camp onto a reactor. An enlisted sailor headed for the nuclear program spends around 6 months in a rating-specific A school, then 6 more months at nuclear power school, learning reactor physics and heat transfer, then another 6 months of hands-on training on an actual working reactor at a prototype training unit before they are ever assigned to a submarine. That's close to a year and a half of training for one crew member. Which is why the Navy requires nuclear track enlisted sailors to commit to 6 years of active duty instead of the standard 4. Every one of them has to be replaced, retrained, and recertified on a schedule that never pauses for the life of the boat. You cannot cut this line item in a tight budget year. The reactor does not run itself, and neither does the training pipeline that feeds it. Here is where this business breaks. In a way most industries never do. You can have unlimited money and still not get your submarine on time. The Columbia program is running 12 to 16 months behind schedule, according to the Government Accountability Office, and the Navy's own 2026 budget documents admit to a 17-month delay on the lead boat. Britain's Astute program saw 4 of its boats come in £838 million over budget in a single update, and within a few more years, the program's whole life cost had climbed by hundreds of millions of pounds again, driven by inflation and slow output at the shipyard. Every nation currently building nuclear submarines has published a version of this same story inside the last few years, from Washington to London to Paris. The pattern repeats across the entire industry. The United States shows you the ceiling on this most clearly. Congress has funded the Navy to build 2 Virginia-class submarines every year since 2011. Actual output has never once hit that number. Since 2022, the real rate has been stuck around 1 boat a year, sometimes a little above it. The country with the largest submarine budget on the planet is buying submarines faster than its own shipyards can physically deliver them, and a backlog of paid-for, half-finished hulls just keeps growing every year. Hand this business an unlimited checkbook tomorrow, and the bottleneck stays exactly where it is, because you cannot print a welder with 15 years of nuclear-certified experience. Eventually, your submarine reaches the end of its service life, and here, the asset stops behaving like an asset at all. You cannot resell a decommissioned nuclear submarine. There is no buyer, no auction, no private market of any kind. In the United States, every retired boat goes through one facility, the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in Washington State. The reactor fuel comes out first and travels by rail to a storage site in Idaho. The hull gets cut into sections later and recycled for scrap. Disposal alone costs between $25 million and $50 million per submarine, after decades of use have already been fully paid for. In the 1990s, the Navy budgeted roughly $2.7 billion just to inactivate around 100 Cold War-era submarines. When you are finished with this asset, you pay again, just to make it disappear. Look at what it costs a country to acquire this capability from nothing, and, well, you understand the whole business at once. Australia has never operated a nuclear submarine. Under the AUKUS agreement with the United States and Britain, its planning envelope runs somewhere between $180 billion and $245 billion US spread across 3 decades. That figure buys 3 to 5 used Virginia-class boats, purchased from the United States as a bridge, development of an entirely new SSN AUKUS class built jointly with Britain, brand new shipyards on Australian soil, and years of training for a submarine workforce that does not yet exist. Australia is building, from the ground up, the entire industrial ecosystem a submarine requires, because that capability cannot be rented for a single afternoon. You either own the whole chain, from the reactor engineers to the dry dock, or you own none of it. And the price is still rising, for everyone, including the country that already has the biggest head start. The planned successor to the Virginia class, known for now as SSNX, is projected to cost between $6.7 billion and $8 billion per boat. A jump of 60 to 90% over what a Virginia costs today. Every generation of this weapon gets quieter, faster, more capable, and every generation gets more expensive to build, in a way that has never once reversed in the history of the program. So, add up what you actually agreed to when you decided to own one of these. A single attack submarine costs somewhere between $2 and $5 billion to build, depending on the country and the year. It costs another $4 to $5 billion to operate across its service life. It takes a decade or more to design and build, usually longer than planned, regardless of how much money sits behind it. This asset cannot be resold, leased, or transferred to another owner. The only remaining step is disposal, which itself costs tens of millions of dollars. What you were really paying for, the entire time, was the shipyard that can produce one at all. The handful of yards, the trained welders, the reactor engineers, and decades of accumulated knowledge that no check can buy in a hurry. Nations that build their own, the United States, Britain, France, Russia, China, are funding a permanent capability that happens to produce a submarine every few years. Nations that don't, like the Netherlands buying an export design, or Australia committing somewhere between $180 billion and $245 billion over 30 years, just to acquire 3 to 5 American-built boats and eventually build its own, they're renting access to someone else's 50-year head start. Every government that has ever signed one of these contracts was paying for time it did not have any other way to buy. Money can build the hull in a decade. It cannot buy the 60 years of welders, engineers, and reactor operators standing behind it. And that is the part of the invoice nobody puts a number on.